Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ellen Red. I am an ascension teacher, a galactic telepath, a remote viewer, and a psychic medium. I teach on every kind of spiritual topic that there is, particularly focused on higher consciousness and healing the humanity. Um, I help people to learn how to activate their 12-strand DNA so that we can restore back all of our lost memories and lost DNA from thousands and thousands of years. Over 200,000 years that we know humans have existed on this planet, and we only have little fragments of 6,000 years worth of information that a lot have been corrupted. So when a soul goes through enlightenment, they are able to retrieve a lot of other information from even other worlds and other galaxies where we've lived before. And I'm particularly guided today to talk about the Nordic people. And so, if you're interested in hearing about Vikings and Scandinavians and Nordic people and the lineage there and how it's affecting the whole collective of our healing process and what the stories are connected to those people, it's going to be a very power-packed video with lots of information, so I would ask you to just stand by. I oftentimes call myself the Scandinavian shaman. That's one of my titles. I use lots of terms to describe myself because I'm not too fond of getting boxed into one particular title. As a multidimensional being, I have lots of variable aspects of my soul. So you can call me the Scandinavian shaman. I am Scandinavian, and I am bringing in information that the ancestors from the spirit realm have been bringing into me for quite a few months, years, really, I should say. But especially in the last few months, they've been really, really trying to get my attention on this information. And they've been having me remote view a lot of things, but in particular related to the Nordic tribes. So I'm going to be making this video about the Viking Nordics, how they're connected to our spiritual ascension process right now, some of the healing work that needs to be done there, and a little bit of history. Because as you guys know, we are under a lot of psychological warfare, and we've been lied to about everything in our history. And what sparked this, I guess there's a lot of things that sparked this video, but I had a white woman um try to shame me for calling myself a shaman because she didn't have an education about her own lineage. And I know that this is the case for a lot of people because we've been lied to about everything, just as they did with the Native Americans and said that these beings were savages. Well, I'm sure that there were groups of savage people there, but there also were groups of highly spiritual people. And the difference between the Scandinavians and the Native Americans is that the Native Americans held on to the sacred teachings that they had. Whereas the Nordics, over the history of humanity, went through a lot of problems and were stripped of their spirituality, and it's been whitewashed and washed under the rug throughout history due to the Christian groups that came in and created a lot of wars. There were millions of people that were murdered, and it was a whole thing. As you guys know, if you watch history and you study the stories, there were always battles between the pagans and the Christians. And so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can in this video. I hope that you guys enjoy it. Please follow along for more. So I had to write notes because it's a lot to unpack. Bear with me. I want to first start with helping to educate you on the truth about the fact that the Nordic people, from the beginning of time, every ounce of history that we have with them, they were always highly, highly spiritual. Everything they did from morning, noon, and night had to do with whether or not it was in alignment with the gods. And when we say gods, the way that they understood spirituality, which, by the way, from an enlightened perspective is true, is that when you go into the other world, when you're in the other world, and there's many dimensions, but we'll just say the spirit world exists of all souls, which means all of your ancestors are there. That's what they talk about when they're talking about the ancestors or the gods, okay? These are beings that achieved, their status through their lives and then went into the other world. And when they call them gods, they're talking about the many gods, the children of God, if you will. Now, how it's been depicted in Hollywood and other places throughout the years is obviously, corrupt and not accurate. And unfortunately, a lot of the Nordic teachings and the spiritual sacred teachings, which were pagan teachings, have been taken from them, turned into a Christian belief system. And in reality, it was a pagan ritual. That means Halloween, that means Christmas, that means Easter. They were all originally Ashtar, Easter, they were all originally pagan rituals and pagan ceremonies that were spiritual, that were their connection to the ancestors in the other world, because again, the Nordic beings were highly, highly sacredly spiritual. Everything they did with the awareness that the spirit world was helping and assisting them in every single thing that was going on in their life. And if something negative happened, they understood karma. They understood that the gods were punishing them because something that they did, they weren't supposed to be doing. So the idea that has been pushed out in Hollywood and in the world against the Nordic tribes is that they were just these savage Vikings and all they wanted to do is bloodshed and things like that. But that actually is not true. That's is equally distorted as saying that Native Americans were just savages. That's literally just propaganda that was put out there that isn't true at all whatsoever. And what we have now left, we meaning the Nordic tribes, what we have left on earth to speak of our spiritual inheritance is things like the runes and cedar magic and those things, but it's kind of been dwindled down to a small handful of items, when in reality the entire world right now celebrates the same mysticism that the Nordics practiced during their time. So most of the world is practicing Nordic shamanism and pagan shamanism through their spiritual rituals. And when we say pagan, people go, oh no, pagan, because of Christian propaganda that began to get put into our collective consciousness when the Romans took over the Vatican and created the Vatican after Yeshua's time on earth. They found a great opportunity there to create a religious situation where a lot of people were going to be worshiping them and giving them money. Well, I mean, look how well they've done. Bravo for them. However, they've wiped out all of the true pagan teachings, which again are not out of alignment with source many ways. So I'm not saying they were perfect people. There were groups that were doing some bad things, small groups, like there always is of every tribe. But I am saying that the teachings that are in the world right now, the rituals everybody practices right now, really came from these Nordic beings and the Viking beings. And now every group, every tribe in the world, every culture in the world has roots in shamanism, because shamanism is the essence of the true soul. Shamans themselves are beings who achieve enlightenment and Christ consciousness. And so again, from a Christ consciousness enlightened perspective, the division between the Christians and the pagans is that the Christians wanted to see this one superior being, one God. The pagans saw it as multiple beings that are all aspects of God. Both are right, because when we go back to source, there's a prime creator there. And when we go back to source and we see the prime creator, we see that all beings are part of the prime creator. So neither story is wrong. It's just duality that people are using to create these wars with one another, when both of them are the truth from higher self, higher source, and from an enlightened perspective. So this is where a lot of our wars have come from, is really just a simple fact that they're not trying to see that both of them are the same thing, okay? And how you choose to worship is fine as long as you're not hurting the other people in the process. But if you can expand your mind, you can see that it's bigger than just this one being right or this one being right. Either way, it was this Christian takeover that happened that really was not in alignment with source, because they were slaughtering people by the millions. And I know that even with the Vikings, they were also slaughtering people. So both of them were committing crimes in the process of the evolution that we've got to this point. However, I will say also that in general, it wasn't really the nature of the Nordic people to just go out and slaughter for fun. There were groups that did that, but in general, that wasn't really the way that they were. We're bringing this forth today in guidance of the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are the ones that have asked me to bring this information forth. And they are very connected also to the Nordic people, as you guys probably all know by now. And they are very much asking that we begin to heal this energy, because there's so much corruption around the stories, the teachings. It affects every individual soul. It affects the lands. It affects everything. So we're going to cover a lot of that as we can. What they're asking me to do right now is they're asking me to assist in bringing this forth, because a lot of European Nordic beings in particular, we're speaking particular to these beings right now, many of them who immigrated out of Norway or Sweden or Scandinavian countries there, they begin to have much soul trauma, because just like the Africans who got taken out of their land and put elsewhere, the Nordic people also had to leave their land for survival's sake and go somewhere else in order to find food and other things. And they also were these great explorers. So they, in many ways, the energy with the ancestors of these beings is really has to do with the pioneering spirit that exists within any of the star walkers that walk in all of the realms, because they're pioneers. You have to pioneer your way through things sometimes. The true spiritual path is to pioneer your way through it, not just sit there and wait for somebody to hand feed it to you with a spoon. The true spirit of a hero in the hero's journey is that you will navigate the unknown territory, which was a massive quality of the Viking beings and the Nordic beings. They had to navigate unknown territory all around the world. They were extraordinary warriors, and they were extraordinary pioneers, because they had no choice. They had to figure out how to survive. They lived in very, very difficult winters. The food wouldn't grow very well. They were put in this place, and they had to forge their way into the unknown. This is a quality that exists within the collective consciousness that affects everybody through that spirit, that powerful spirit that forges through the impossible, which is really the essence, the spiritual essence of the Vikings and the Nordic beings, that still bleeds through in our world today. Now, I'm not saying they're the only one that have this spirit, but I'm saying in general, this is part of their piece of the pie that has been brought into the collective consciousness and part of the story of humanity. And many of you watching this, even if you're not a Nordic DNA in this timeline, maybe you were in other timelines. Okay, so don't get too screwy about that. Let me get through the video and see how you feel after we go through everything. So recently, I had the great pleasure of having developed a very, I'm so grateful for this relationship with the Grandmaster David Icke, who I am a huge fan of. And he told me that, because I didn't know this, he told me the other day that it was the Vikings who found the ice wall. And I should have made sense that they were the ones that found it, but I hadn't thought about it. And he brought that to my consciousness. And I thought that was so extraordinary. It's been now taken over by the British. and they have control over the ice wall. But it was, of course, the Nordics who were out in their boats in the middle of nowhere thousands of years ago, exploring unknown territory, who discovered the ice wall. This again speaks to the spirit of these people that is running through the bloodlines of these particular tribes and these particular souls, or who are connected to these tribes. This is important when we start to talk about healing DNA, because these aspects of DNA live dormant in your being. If you're connected to whatever bloodline you're connected to, those stories live inside of your DNA, and they can be accessed based on what tribe you're in, and or what past lives you've had. So there's lots of reasons why it's important to reconnect to the stories of our ancestors and to honor them, because they have done so much work to bring us to where we're at today, not just in their physical lives, but energetically speaking, because they forged through the energy work of getting us to this state of evolution as a collective conscious. So going back to some of the ancestral wounds around these people, I just want you to understand, especially if you're connected to the Nordic tribes, that many of the Nordic people right now are experiencing severe, extreme trauma, especially the ones who don't live in the Netherlands anymore, in Scandinavia, is that they're suffering from a disconnect from their roots. They oftentimes had to leave behind their homes, their houses, their families, and go into the unknown, oftentimes dying in boats and or wherever else, going into wars because they had to survive. They didn't have a choice. And this was how they had to survive to preserve this bloodline, which, by the way, is connected to the 12 tribes of Israel. It's connected to the source, and it was important that they learned how to go through this in our evolutionary process. It's really easy for us to go back and look in time and say, oh, you did this wrong, or you did this wrong. But back then, times were different. We weren't as evolved as we are today, and we had to do certain things to survive. That's the evolution of humanity that we're all part of. And we have no business going back and beating people up for the past. We have to focus on where we're at now and how to move it forward. Take that torch and move it forward. So those ancestors experienced extreme suffering, but they were also tremendous warriors, the males and the females. And by the way, speaking of which, the Viking beings and the Nordic beings back then had a tremendous respect for women. They did not look at women like women were less than men. Women were equal shield maidens and warriors, just as the masculines were, and oftentimes tremendous warriors that won many battles. And secondly, they also were treated like kings and queens. So if one of them took over a piece of land, she was the queen, and that was it. There wasn't this hierarchy of male versus female that is a distortion that came into play during the Christian era. And I know that's going to trigger some people, but I want you to keep an open mind so that you can really, really understand the broader picture. We're not beating Christians up. We love our Christian brothers also, because Christ consciousness is the key to heaven too. But it's been a little warped, and there's some misconceptions there that need to be healed and corrected even within the Christian community, very much so. So if you're truly, truly trying to align with spirit, you'll be open to hearing this and open to understanding that we all need to improve on these things so that we can heal all of these timelines past, which is part of the great work that we're doing as ascending beings. When you get a little deeper in past your personal healing, you're going to have to start to get into a lot of other stuff. And so what I'm talking about here today is some big stuff from a lot of timelines there, okay? In addition to the ancestral wounding that we have ancestors, and I tell you, my Viking ancestors speak really fiercely into my blood. They don't let me right now get off the hook of what they're trying to show me. They're very insistent on me bringing this forth into the collective consciousness, because there is a lot of healing that needs to be done there, particularly with these tribes of people and in the land itself, as well as within the collective conscious, because there has been such distorted propaganda put out there against these people. And as you see with all this anti-white hatred that's being put out in the collective conscious right now, which is anti-Christ, it's against God. And it is also what it does when you start to say, oh, white people this and white people, is you literally cut off your access to the ancestors in the spirit world, because you're saying to universe, I don't like them, I don't want it. And the universe says, okay, we can't give you what they have to give you then. All their knowledge, all their strength, all their wisdom, all their hidden gifts that have been suppressed by these religious cults over the years, you're cutting yourself off from. So it's important that you learn that we're all connected as a one soul, and each tribe of being is connected to specific teachings and specific understandings that help to heal the whole collective. And we have been systematically repressing this ancient wisdom also of not only the cedar magic, but of the pagan rituals, the spiritual rituals, and the teachings that actually are very connected to source as well, and connected to nature. If you really study what they worshipped and what they did, they honored nature, they honored the land, they honored the gods. They were highly spiritual. They were very, very connected to Native American people. And if you don't know my history, I'm going to say this because I feel like whoever's going to watch this in the internet, there's always those that think they hear something and they think they know. My background is that I have a history of multiple generations of Nordic beings who immigrated into the United States and ended up in Utah. And in Utah, there are many, many Native American tribes, of which my family became very close friends with. And we still share. We share the same cemeteries. They're half Navajos and half Reds. And we have many, many teachings that we learn from them. My grandmother was highly loved and revered by these people, and they taught her how to make beaded belts and beaded jewelry, and they gave her many sacred gifts from the natives there. And to this day, we have a very solid respect for one another. So my upbringing had a lot to do with both some Nordic teachings, as well as I did have a father that was Mormon, but I also came from Nordic lineage, and also I was surrounded by Native American teachings as well. Even in my college, it was very prevalent there. So I was blessed to have both all of that in my realm. And of course, I was highly psychic, and I had near-death experiences, and had been speaking to the Pleiadians and the star people, who, by the way, the Native Americans are also well aware of. So I have a very rich knowledge about shamanism. I have experience through being an enlightened soul and through connecting with the Pleiadians and other star tribes. And also my ancestors, who are Nordic, do very much speak to me about many things, which is why they're asking me to do this video, because I'm telling you right now, the way that they're coming into me is that they are very powerful spirits, and they are not liking that their blood, sweat, and tears has been, the way they say to me, like shat upon, like spit on them for everything they did, even for humanity to this day, including finding that ice wall. Okay, so when we're spatting on them, it doesn't matter what race you are, you spat on them, then the ancestors become very unhappy, unsettled, because that's not right to disregard what they did. They bled and died for people's freedoms and for the ability to move to new land where they could live freely and have food. They fought against the bankers. They fought against these ridiculous religious paradigms that were corrupting people and enslaving people. And we're not saying this again because we're against the Christians, because even the ancestors became Christians, some of them, and they became friends with them too. It's just in the mind where all these problems happen, where people begin to start finding reasons why they can hate each other instead of coming together. But from the way that they're coming to me is they really want this to be heard because they're not satisfied at this time. They're wrestling in the spirit world over what's happening on earth at this time, and also because their sacrifices that they made have been in some ways looks like they were in vain, and the souls, the ancestors of them, their children and great grandchildren and so on, are unhappy now because on earth they're lost too. They don't have connection to their roots. Who are they? Who were these Nordic people? What were the real lifestyle for them? Most of which has been wiped out because during all those wars, they swept away that knowledge and information, and they said, oh, they're just these savage pagans. That was not true at all. And many of those teachings has been wiped off of our history books, just like the days in Alexandrian library that has been wiped away, and many other timelines where they burned everything to the ground and created a false narrative to get you to believe. And so that's part of what they want to bring up today. They're also asked me to speak on the land wounding that is in the Netherlands and in Scandinavian. Is that there's traumas there. There were many wars there. There were many wars there, and there's a lot of trauma there. People who lost their loved ones that had to leave to go explore and never returned again. And this is some trauma and healing that we are going to do. I'm going to eventually, maybe in the next year or two, take some crew out there with some of the Swedish and Scandinavian brothers and sisters. And we're going to go there and do some grid work specifically for this because I'm called to do that. So if you're interested in that, you can stay in touch with me, and we'll be working on putting that together in the next couple of years. I don't know when, but we will start a group and we'll put you all in there. And for anybody that is connected to that and wants to be, so that when the time comes, we can let you guys know through that group. But there are land wounds there, and soul wounds, and ancestral wounds that are connected to this whole timeline from back then that has really never been healed since. There are many Nordic souls that have been scattered throughout the world since, and feeling disconnected to their roots and feeling disconnected to who they are and what their background even is, because they don't have remembrance of it anymore, and they've taken on the culture of France or the culture of the Brits or the culture of whichever nation that they ended up in, the United States or where else, and they don't really have those roots in their spirit. And it's causing tremendous suffering there as well. So we're being called to reconnect to this. Now, if you're a different tribe, that story may be the same for you with your own variations, but specifically for the Nordic people, this is what they're bringing in. And another thing that they're saying to me is that as we start to become more conscious and activate all of our DNA, part of the DNA activations itself is going to help bring up and resurrect the memories of the knowledge that was lost. There was lost knowledge there, and a lot of lost knowledge. And so where the Egyptians had all of this great spiritual teachings, well, the Nordics had this also, and it's been lost and it's been wiped out, literally wiped out. And so they're asking for the Nordic tribes now to begin to find this within themselves as well. The teachings that are in Egypt, the Egyptian mystery school teachings and the teachings that are in the Greek gods and all these different cultures, these teachings are all true for all of us because they represent spiritual knowledge that belongs to every tribe. But there's some pieces that are missing, as I'm being told by the spirit guides from the Nordic people, because of the way that things went down there. So that's what they're asking. If you are connected to this tribe, find inside of yourself, try to find these memories, ask your ancestors to bring it to the surface and help re-educate the world about this truth about these people, because they absolutely were highly spiritual. And anybody that knows the Pleiadians also knows that the Pleiadian beings have a huge pivotal role on the earth of helping to assist and bring in spirituality on the earth, which again explains why they're connected to the Nordic people and why they were so spiritual, because they were receiving knowledge from the Pleiadians thousands and thousands of years ago, but the knowledge, a lot of it has been lost. So we're going through a timeline where we're being asked to begin to find this in your soul work. I am going to be working a lot on this over the next couple of years, so be looking out for more if you want to learn more. I do have a page called the Scandinavian Shaman, as well as my Ellen Red page and my Psychic Ellen Red page. I think it's Rishi Shakina now. But you can go to my website and get access to those pages and just keep following me, and you'll keep seeing where to get the other links. If you need them, you can message me, okay? Obviously, those of you that know me know that I'm a spiritual shield maiden. And if you guys know my energy, you know that I have that Viking kind of blood in me. It's in my blood. I couldn't take it out if I wanted to. And as I've become an ascended being, it's been transmuted now more into a shield maiden for the spirit world. So we're here forging all that our ancestors did and taking it further to bring us into higher states of evolution. And so, again, if you're kind of feeling the call for this, I would say to understand that this has to do with healing the DNA. It doesn't have to do with shaming anybody for anybody's past. The past is the past, and it's important to all of us. And when we wipe it out, like these dark beings are always trying to do, they're doing that with the whole BLM thing right now, and they're wiping out all of this history. You defile the DNA of every soul. They can't get the information they need. They need the information. It isn't about right or wrong. It's about truth. It's a conscious kingdom, and it's about truth. And when you wipe out history, you wipe out the memories of the ancestors that live in your DNA. We must, as a people, stop allowing them to wipe out our true stories, because they matter. No matter who was wrong or right, they matter. The truth matters. And because what we're doing when we ascend, we are healing DNA through retrieving memory, which is something that everybody should be working on in their spiritual work. That's what soul searching is for. You can't retrieve it if you don't have access to it. That's what we're dealing with the Nordic people. Access to the information that they had and the way of life that they had back then is almost wiped out. And so we are trying to retrieve that. I am one of them who is bringing forth memories from many other timelines, particularly that one, of great spiritual wisdom that was there, tremendous shamans that lived in that region back then that had very ancient knowledge coming from the star people. Okay? It's not just the Native Americans, believe me, you. And that's really what we need to understand, is that these shamanic teachings came into all of the tribes in different ways because we came from the stars. And finally, I'm just going to say that, again, you know, as I'm being brought into this particular subject, because I cover many, but this particular subject is a big one. It's a lot of energy work that I've been doing with the Nordic people. I work with a lot of Nordic clients. I have been really, I'm working on a book around this also because I'm being asked to. And also, I'm very called to begin a gathering out there in time so that we can come together, because that's how we start to heal these memories. As we come in, I have me and my super consciousness, and I'm able to access this massive super consciousness, and so can everybody else. And then when we come together, it opens up a mega consciousness. And that's what we're going to do when we get there, is to start to try to heal that energy and to heal that land and to heal the trauma and to heal one another and to heal that for the collective consciousness, so that the DNA then can be brought into the whole collective DNA strands to heal everyone. So it's a big deal. I don't know if everybody understood what I was saying, and that's okay. If you don't, you can keep following, and as time goes on, it will make more sense to you. But I hope that resonated for you guys. And I will see you next time. If you guys liked the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, ask me if you have questions. I'll be happy to come back. I'm getting a little bit more and more doing videos as I can. And we'll keep going forward with this information, but feel free to share the video out also if you feel like it's going to help somebody else. It's really important that we understand these things as a collective so that we can disseminate the misinformation around the Nordic people, around lineages, around shamanism, and try to help heal one another as a people together. We're in this together as one, and we have to be able to honor each other's individuality and each other's uniqueness and each other's cultures in order to come together in love so that we can support one another's differences. If you don't respect individuality, then you can't get into unity consciousness. You have to have sovereignty first before you can have unity. And so it's okay that we look at the individual parts and then that we come together collectively. And we're being asked to do that in this case with this subject as well. I hope that helped, and I'll see you guys next time. Namaste.